Barbados, or Barbatos. From the DC universe, Barbatos, aka the Hyper-Adapter, is a bat-like cosmic being that often appears in the form of a bat-like demon that can traverse time and space freely. But in the new 52, the character is reimagined as the god of the dark multiverse and the first incarnation of Batman. Yes, you heard it right, this super evil demon god is actually known to have taken the form of a bat in Wayne Manor, which Bruce takes as a sign from his late father to commit to the Batman mantle. I don't know why he does this though, because Batman then commits his whole life to fending off evil forces. It's sort of a trade-off, because although Batman goes on to become, well, Batman, Barbatos ends up using the hero as a portal to the multiverse, and starts work on assembling his own roster of evil Batmen, called the Dark Knights. This would include Batman Who Laughs, among others.
Number 9. Parallax. Parallax isn't technically or officially a god, but they are one of the manifestations of the emotions of the color spectrum, an avatar and physical manifestation of fear, what the color yellow represents and embodies, at least over at DC Comics. And they are also a cosmic entity who is super ancient and powerful, so I think in regards to Green Lantern lore and importance, we can put them on god level. Parallax was the one responsible for taking over Green Lantern Hal Jordan, feeding on his own fear and insecurities over the years. In fact, the graying of his hair at his temples was later pointed out as an indicator of Parallax's growing strength. Fun fact. At least that's how some people saw it. Could also just be Hal getting older, really. Parallax took over Hal, becoming one with him, and causing Jordan to give up his Green Lantern mantle, and be known simply as Parallax. As Parallax, Hal Jordan threatened the entire universe and destroyed the Green Lantern Corps and their major battery, which is pretty villainous and powerful stuff.
Null, the original creator of the symbiotes and eldritch god of darkness. Null is a very powerful and very old villain. He is first awakened when Celestials invade his kingdom, and he decides it is time to create his first symbiote. His first creation comes in the form of a sword, which he uses to decapitate a Celestial. This is his first big demonstration of power, and it's quite something. He then decides to branch out and expand his venture of creating symbiotes to take over all of the good in the cosmos. And he does this by creating what's known as a hive mind center with himself as the nexus, meaning he'll have control over any and all symbiotes that are controlled through the hive. His army then really starts coming together with draconic monsters, anamorphic creatures, and shadow men, all under his control and dedicated to satiating his evil hunger for life. Luckily though, Null eventually finds himself disintegrated in the center of the sun. But that's a huge fast forward I did there. This villain god does some serious damage to the greater good of life in the cosmos before he's finally taken out.
And at number 7, Thane. Thane was not always a supervillain. He just had the unfortunate luck of being Thanos' son. We know how well being one of Thanos' kids turned out for Gamora. During Thanos' galactic conquest, the Mad Titan fathered many children. During the 2013 Infinity story arc, Thanos decides to invade Earth after learning that most of the Avengers are off planet. Now at the time, he targets the home of the Inhumans, saying that he'll spare the rest of the Inhumans in exchange for the deaths of all Inhumans between the age of 16 and 22. Now the real intention of this invasion was to locate his lost son, Thane, and kill him. Now Thane just thinks he's a regular old dude until the Terrigen mists are released and his dormant powers awaken. Powers strong enough to one day give his papa a run for his money. That's why Thanos wants the kid killed off. But one of Thanos' Black Order, Ebony Maw, betrays him and ends up finding Thane first, turning him against his father, which results in the eternal Inhuman hybrid trapping his daddy dearest in a pocket limbo stasis.
Mephisto. This guy is known as an extra-dimensional demon who takes on the likeness of a traditional devil from the Christian religion, and he resides in a place he calls Hell, or Hades, but he isn't actually Satan, and his homeworld isn't actually Hell as we know it. He uses these terms in an effort to exploit the constructs of fear and evil that humans have instilled into our culture. Although he does have ties to the original story of Adam and Eve in the form of the snake in that tale, so I don't know, seems kinda Satan-y to me. But his origins are widely understood to be unknown, and one of the only theories comes from the story of Nemesis. This being was born at the beginning of time and tried to create other beings in the likeness of his own immense power, but accidentally created a bunch of demons. And as you guessed it, Mephisto is one of these demons. Nemesis then ends his own life and becomes the Infinity Stones. That's just a side bit of lore for you, in case you didn't know. But thank God the Infinity Stones are banned for demons, because if Mephisto got his hands on those, it'd be all over.
Number 5. Thanos. Thanos has been godlike many times, including the Infinity Gauntlet story, but he also basically became a god in an alternate future where he had succeeded in wiping out almost all life in the universe. In the Thanos Wins story arc, only a few opponents were left standing there, including himself. He had killed everyone in order to be with death, and had his herald, Cosmic Ghost Rider, go to retrieve his past self to help him with one final task: to take out the great and older version of Thanos himself, King Thanos, if you will. This would thereby allow him to be with death, but the older version of Thanos himself needed help to do the deed. He was like, I can't take my own life. I need some help here. Help me out. However, younger Thanos was over his love of death at the time and saw this older version as being weak for asking for help, despite the fact that he was so successful and terrifying in his own reality. Also, Thanos, I feel like asking for help does not make you weak. That's just my opinion, but hey. Younger Thanos decided to leave his older self alone, returning to his own reality and refusing to become him, thereby denying this older King Thanos' very existence. So, he was a god, but now he's gone. Bye!
CHTHON is one of the original Elder Gods that inhabited Earth billions of years ago. Over time, CHTHON becomes the first black magician on Earth after studying the mystical forces of the universe. Unfortunately, about 1 billion years ago, these elder gods that CHTHON was a part of degenerate and start turning into demons, CHTHON included. Luckily, one of them, Gaia, avoids this transformation and keeps her pure form, giving birth to Adam, who makes it their duty to slay these demons. But CHTHON avoids the God Eater and escapes by creating another dimension known as the Flickering Realms. CHTHON's writings are left on Earth in the form of scrolls, which are eventually bound together into the Darkhold. So his influence continuously finds its way back to Earth despite his banishment to this new dimension. He even possesses Modred and eventually Scarlet Witch for a time to keep pushing his evil magic agenda on his original home of Earth.
Moving on to number 3, we have the Joker. Here we have an occasion where the Joker became a god, and it wasn't even in a Batman story. In Superman issue 160, the Joker ends up tricking Mr. Mxyzptlk into giving him 99.9% of his reality-altering abilities. Now when this happens, the Joker becomes practically omnipotent. And what does a borderline Joker god do? Well, for starters, he calls himself Emperor Joker. Then he shapes the world into one of his own image, which means it is a batshit crazy hell on Earth. This all goes down within 69 seconds of the Joker having this power. He entertains himself by killing Lex Luthor over and over and over again, and then he ate the entire population of China just for shits and giggles. As one does. And what about Batman? Well, he tortured him daily only to bring him back to life and do it all over again every single day, taking extra pride in these killings thanks to their very messed up relationship with one another. Luckily, Superman manages to evade the Joker for a bit, reaches out to the weakened Mxyzptlk and the Spectre, and they all realize that the Joker's weakness, even after getting all this power, is still Batman. They use that bond against him to depower him, and everything is back to normal. And I guess all of China was regurgitated.
Anti-Monitor. We all know this guy. He's a real thorn in the side of everything good in the universe. He's also another one of those characters that finds his origins at the very dawn of time. Okay, so he's not around since day one, but almost. He's first created as the result of a conflict on the ancient planet of Oa, during which the inhabitants fight it out over the decision of whether to destroy all of the evil in the universe or only some of it. It's crazy how petty wars can be, eh? Even in the ancient cosmos. Anyway, the bad guys go to a dimension called Cord, where Anti-Monitor is birthed. In the positive matter universe, the Monitor is also created, the counterpart to Anti-Monitor as you can tell, and you best believe those two end up fighting. But it's no normal war. They battle it out for 1 million years, and I'll save you a million years and skip to the end, it ends in a tie. They both go unconscious and hibernate for 9 billion more years. Of course, this is just the beginning. Anti-Monitor comes in and out of pretty much every DC character's story at one point or another as a major threat, and I'm sure you can guess why.
Number 1, the one below all. Probably one of the most powerful of all gods in the Marvel Universe. Definitely the most powerful god I would say, on this list. The one below all is the dark counterpart to the one above all, which is seen as the creator of all the Marvel Universe and multiverse besides, one of the most powerful beings of goodness in the whole of Marvel Comics. Likewise, the one below all is therefore one of the most powerful beings of evil. They are typically connected to gamma mutates, and can control and manipulate those who have been mutated by gamma radiation. The crazy thing is that without the one below all, we actually can't have the one above, and vice versa. One cannot exist without the other, and so with them both comes a whole lot of bad and a whole lot of good. Number 10. Harley Quinn. There was a time when Harley Quinn in the comics ended up being recruited by Granny Goodness of Apocalypse. She would end up going with her to Apocalypse, and even end up being convinced by her to join her team of female Furies, who are effectively new gods. This only ended up being a thing for a few issues, but gave Harley a pretty rad new look and a hammer. During her time as a Fury, she took up the name Hammer Harleen. Because the female Furies are considered new gods, this technically made Harley Quinn a god, temporarily. The whole reason that she ended up joining in the comics was because she was on vacation and looking to take a break from her life, a bit of a escapism if you will, which this new cosmic role provided in spades. I mean, it's a pretty cool vacation if you get to just be a female Fury for a little while, right? However, eventually it was time for Harley to return to her life, and so she had to fight her way off the team in the end, because, you know, people don't really leave the female Furies peacefully. Also, I'm pretty sure she was not a great female Fury. We also see her time as a female Fury hinted at in season 2 of the Harley Quinn animated series. Number 9. Blackheart. Blackheart is the son of Mephisto, who would eventually seek to overthrow his father and become a ruler of a portion of hell. Just a portion. Not only was he basically born into godhood, but he also worked hard to earn it for himself, or he at least worked hard to employ other people to help him in earning it for himself. So, didn't really earn it for himself, I guess. Mephisto created Blackheart out of all the evil energy gathered from centuries of misdeeds committed on a hill in New York called Christ's Crown. Blackheart would eventually build a town around Christ's Crown that he would rule, but after being defeated by Wolverine, the Punisher, and Ghost Rider, he would recruit them to help him overthrow his father. Also, Wolverine, the Punisher, and Ghost Rider is like a pretty OP like gang of heroes, I think. Number 8. KORVAC. Michael KORVAC was a villain from the future who sought more power and influence, traveling back in time and becoming godlike in terms of his power levels when he managed to take on some of the power cosmic. Pretty sweet. His newly founded powers and the way he used them eventually attracted the attention of the Avengers, who he managed to defeat with the help of his romantic partner, THANE, daughter of the Collector, a name that was actually also given to the Collector's servant in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. She was named Karina, though I imagine she was not meant to be a stand-in for his daughter, so if you saw her and you were like, is that his daughter? Probably not. She was the one that got all like explodey when she touched the Infinity Gem. Not a good look. However, in the comics, in the end, Karina came to lose faith in KORVAC, and it was because of this that he decided to take his own life and undo what he had done, using his powers to bring back the fallen Avengers. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list, if you are loving it as much as I am loving it, be sure to show us some love by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 7. Khonshu. Khonshu is an inherently an evil god when it comes to actual Egyptian mythology, just to be clear. And even in the world of Marvel, he's actually done a lot of good. But he's also done some pretty shady things. Especially recently, he's done some pretty shady things. During the Age of Khonshu event in the Avengers series, Khonshu actually used his avatar Moon Knight, aka Mark Spector, known as the Fist of Khonshu, to help him defeat Mephisto. Now, while this sounds like a good thing, since when it comes to Marvel's gods, Mephisto, being like Marvel's devil or Satan, is kinda one of the worst of the worst, it turned out to not be so good after it was revealed that Khonshu planned on taking over the earth and turning it into his own Egyptian underworld. This revelation caused Moon Knight to turn on his god, and as Khonshu often likes to remind us, his father, teaming up with the Avengers to take him down. Following this, Khonshu would actually become imprisoned in the dungeons of Asgard, and while he can still visit Moon Knight via visions, he can no longer be physically present on Earth while imprisoned. Number 6. Apocalypse. Apocalypse became a god very briefly during the Otherworld tournament of Ten of Swords. Of course, some may see him as a godlike being all the time, but at this moment he truly was a god, just as his wife had been before him. Though here, Apocalypse was also able to show his strength and resilient will off, separate from the godlike power that he attained. remained. Near the end of the tournament, an all-out war broke out when Apocalypse, after winning the battle against Genesis, refused to kill her. Annihilation took over Genesis, causing a war between all involved, including the Amenthi demons. However, Apocalypse would manage to wrench free the golden mask of Annihilation from Genesis, sundering their connection. As such, the mask would then possess him, but Apocalypse's will was strong, and he was able to resist the temptation of its power. He simply used it to make the Amenthi stand down, causing a ceasefire basically. Saturnine would then remove the mask from Apocalypse and turn it into a staff, but boom, with her magics, making it much less of an influential artifact from there on out. I feel like you know you're powerful if you're like, yeah, I'm just gonna wear a mask that turns me into a god and be able to be like, I don't really want to be influenced by you, so I'm just not gonna do that. Like, that's power.
In at number 5, the Magus. Adam Warlock may seem like one of the most noble heroes out there in the Marvel Universe, and sure, he kind of is, but the character actually has an evil half named the Magus. Over the years, we've seen 3 incarnations of this evil dude. The first was an older godlike Magus from a potential future timeline that Adam encountered, who was the leader of a religious empire known as the Universal Church of Truth. Long story short, Church of Truth was not a good church or religion. It was pretty bad and evil. This Magus was a tyrant, and in order to prevent him from existing, Warlock actually works with his foe Thanos in order to ensure that this Magus timeline is erased. But that was not the end of the Magus. After Warlock had acquired the Infinity Gauntlet, his soul expelled 2 halves, one good, one evil, and accidentally gives those halves corporeal forms. And guess what? The evil half names himself the Magus, and then tries to get the gauntlet for himself. Warlock then would become Magus later on after repairing damage to the space-time continuum and ended up dying. But the Magus is resurrected as a child later, and also Warlock is resurrected because death in comics doesn't really exist.
Number 4, Joker. There was a time in the comics when the Joker ended up getting 99.9% of Mr. Mixia's pitiless power. Mr. Mixia had only intended to give him 0.01%, but was tricked into doing just the opposite, because ain't that just how it goes. With this level of power, Joker ruled as a god. He did all sorts of wacky and awful things. He ate all of China, put Superman in an insane asylum, and tormented and tortured Batman daily, killing him on repeat, but basically always bringing him back to life. He was defeated though, and lost his power when it was acknowledged that without Batman, the Joker was nothing, and he simply couldn't exist without the hero, which was why he had never killed him permanently with his newfound power. This weakness ended up being his downfall. Number 3, Darkseid. Another guy that doesn't know how to chill. Even though Perpetua can literally bend reality to her whim, Darkseid is constantly in the DC universe, which means he basically has to always exist. You can't ever really defeat him because Darkseid is. What is Darkseid? No, he just is. Every time I say this in a video, I'm like, it sounds so confusing, and I feel like anyways, I'm gonna explain it to you right now. Darkseid is a short phrase that implies that Darkseid will always exist. This also extends to the idea of what Darkseid represents. The phrase was actually introduced by Grant Morrison, and to me it has always embodied the idea that Darkseid is more than just the being. He's the feeling, the fear, the destruction, and in some cases, the oppression that Darkseid represents. Even without Darkseid, those things still exist, and so in a way he can never really be gone. But also you can interpret this phrase more literally, as after all, Perpetua may have been a powerhouse, but she's gone now, while Darkseid still is. Number 2, Poison Ivy. Poison Ivy was, I suppose, more of a ruler than a god, but she definitely appeared godlike in terms of her powers during the Everyone Loves Ivy arc of Tom King's Batman. She also did a pretty good job, I think, of like controlling everything, which is why I put her so high up on my list. Also, I just like Poison Ivy, so come at me. You don't like Poison Ivy? Let's fight in the comments. No, I'm kidding. Let's not fight. Let's just love each other and love our differences. In this story, Ivy finds a way to control the world's population through the greens that they consume. Only a few manage to evade her influence, but overall the world seems to be even better with Ivy ruling it, to be honest. However, taking away people's free will in exchange for turning them into a happy collective is pretty frowned upon by the heroes who do remain. Batman finds a way to free Harley Quinn from Poison Ivy's influence, hoping that she might be able to resolve this issue more peacefully, or just, resolve it at all, as both Batman and Catwoman are a bit at a loss as to what to do, considering how powerful Ivy is at this point. Harley manages to talk Pamela down, and in the end, Poison Ivy gives up her control willingly. But also, how cool would it be if Ivy just continued to rule the world, and that was DC now, and that was just how it went forever? I personally would read that comic book. I think it'd be great. Number 1. Dr. Doom. Dr. Doom ended up becoming a god during the recreation of Battleworld. When the incursions happened, he was the one to stand up and take on the power of Molecule Man in order to try and save the multiverse. He wasn't a great god in this new world, but hey, he did his best, stitching together all the alternate worlds with the Earth of 616 to save each in creating a patchwork-like interconnected reality where each alternate Earth basically became like a province or a territory in this new battle world, which God Emperor Doom himself ruled over. In the end, Doom was convinced to give up his power in order to make things right, and turn the universe back into something similar to what it had been previously. He would pass on Molecule Man's power to Reed Richards, who in turn would alter reality so that Doom's face would be healed again, and so that Doom would believe the Fantastic Four were no more, which allowed him to finally be happy, ending the story with a big Dr. Doom smile. How lovely. I love a happy ending.
In at number 10, we have Darkseid. Darkseid has always had a whole lot of power. First introduced in Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen issue 134 in 1970, and later properly introduced in 1971's Forever People issue 1. The first was a cameo. Darkseid is the tyrannical leader of the planet Apokolips. His goal is to conquer the universe and eliminate all free will and reshape the universe into his own image. Yeah, pretty darn evil. It doesn't help that at his base level he's one of the strongest beings in the DC universe. So when he became even stronger in the 2005 Mr. Miracle series after attaining the anti-life equation, an equation that allows its user to completely control the thoughts and emotions of all living beings in the universe, yikes, you can imagine how freaked out many superheroes were about it. He used it to destroy the Fourth World, and during Final Crisis he began to take over Earth and corrupt the multiverse. Luckily, Batman sacrificed himself to fatally wound Darkseid, and the Justice League managed to finish him off. Moving on to number 9, Onslaught. Onslaught may be part of a less than favorable story event that typically gets criticized by fans, but the amount of power this character has is absolutely undeniable. Onslaught is the darkest parts of Charles Xavier's subconscious merged with the darkest parts of Magneto's mind, coming together to create a separate persona who has complete psychic omnipotence. This was a product of a battle between the X-Men and Magneto's acolytes, with Xavier using his telepathic abilities to shut down Magneto's mind and render him catatonic. Because of that, those two dark aspects of both men merged and Onslaught was born. He would terrorize the entire Marvel 616 universe, with the Avengers and the Fantastic Four having to sacrifice themselves in order to put an end to him. Although they were resurrected thanks to Franklin Richards, who made sure they were reborn in a pocket universe he created. That's a whole other can of worms for another video. And at number 8, Granny Goodness. Aside from some excellent alliteration that makes it sound like this character deserves to be on the Golden Girls, Granny Goodness, who first appeared in 1971's Mr. Miracle Volume 1 Issue 2, was not always a new god. She began her life as a lowly, which is the term for the brutally oppressed impoverished class of people on the planet of Apokolips. Once she was young, she was taken away from her parents and forced to train as one of Darkseid's hounds, a group of elite soldiers. Now she impressed Darkseid so much during this time that he had her run the training facility for his soldiers, utilizing techniques like brainwashing and torture in what can only be deemed as a brutal parody of childcare. She often runs orphanages for Darkseid as well. After completing her training, she became a new god, now endowed with immortality, superhuman physical attributes, along with becoming a skilled warrior, leader, and tactician. She also wields a mega rod and a bunch of advanced technology. And, fun fact, Jack Kirby, her creator, modeled her after Phyllis Diller.
Number 7, Savitar. Savitar's name literally means god of motion in Hindu, so it's no surprise that this villain is considered a god to some. He basically became a speed god, even going so far as to create a kind of religion, or at the very least I think we can call it a cult, surrounding him. He gathered followers and became known as their leader. Even in his absence, his cult, known as the Thunderbolt Agents at the time, flourished and grew, even without him. That's how powerful Savitar's beliefs are. Or believing in Savitar is, I guess. Savitar is also known for being an enemy of the Flash, and in the CW verse is literally the evil version of Barry Allen from an alternate timeline. But in the comics, not so much. In the comics, I think we still don't know who he is, actually. And I feel like that's been a thing forever, and is still a thing now, even in Prime Earth continuity. Who is Savitar? We don't know.
And at number 6, Lex Luthor. For a mortal man, Lex Luthor has more than proved himself capable of going up against some of the strongest individuals kicking around the DC universe. His genius-level intellect has allowed for him to rule over Metropolis, so to speak, with only the Dark Knight's Wayne Industries being the only true competitor for how far and wide LexCorp's reaches. Now, during the Darkseid War, a lot of characters in the DC universe got to dabble in being a deity, and Lex was one of them. In Justice League Volume 2, Issue 45, Lex benefits from another DC big bad dying. Darkseid bites the dust, and his Omega effect ends up being contained inside of Lex, which turns the bald bad guy into the god of Apocalypse, getting to choose whether he would free Apocalypse from tyranny or become a tyrant himself.
Number 5, Perpetua. I kind of feel bad actually that Perpetua is only like halfway up this list, but that's alright. She had her time in the sun. It has come to a close. Perpetua has to be one of the most powerful godlike beings in all of DC Comics. She basically sought to take over and destroy all of the multiverse so that she might rebuild it in her own image, but was stopped by her children and trapped in the Source Wall. By the way, one of her children is also on this list. See if you can figure out who it is! Later on, she teamed up with the Batman Who Laughs to get free, but ended up being double-crossed by him, tricked out of her own reality-shattering power. Still, the power was originally hers, and she was trapped in the Source Wall because there was nowhere else strong enough to hold her originally. Perpetua's only downside as a being who can bend reality and even life and death to her whim is that she relies on crisis energy to fuel her immense power, which is how the Batman Who Laughs was able to steal her power from her. He was like, I'm gonna take that crisis energy. Gulp. Yum.
Up next at 4, Molecule Man. Molecule Man Owen Reese first debuted in Fantastic Four issue 20 in 1963, but it wasn't until the character's later years in the comics that his full range of power would become apparent to others in the superhero and villain community. Capable of reality warping and molecular manipulation on a multiversal level, Molecule Man, previously a villain and sometimes a reluctant hero, is very, very powerful, and nothing like his involvement in the 2015 Secret Wars event goes to show that better. During that series, he began to overcome the subconsciously imposed mental blocks he had placed on himself to prevent him from affecting organic molecules. He would extract the Beyonder from Cosmos and battle him over 3 spatial dimensions, which threatened to cause a multi-universal scale of destruction. Fun! According to Dr. Doom and Reed Richards, he is a multiversal composite entity, a single creature that manifests fractions of its entire being in each universe within the Marvel multiverse. Plus, he was also created by the Beyonders to serve as a living bomb. He will destroy the universe that he's living in if he dies, so that is also fun. So much power, but so much death.
Number 3, Gore the God Butcher. Gore the God Butcher reveals himself to have become a god through permanently bonding and integrating with the All Black on the alternate Earth of 14412, a future where Thor becomes King Thor. So many kings on my list. Gore, in transferring his own consciousness into the Necrosword and thereby bonding permanently with the All Black, has become an eternal being incapable of dying. Gore had basically become one with the universe. He would still end up being subdued, but it would require him unleashing the god Tempest from within Mjolnir to do so. And even then, this version of him wasn't technically dead, just rendered powerless and pretty permanently incapacitated. But still, I don't think he killed him there.
And at number 2, Dr. Doom. Doom has become a god twice over the years, and both times were during the Secret Wars story events. Now, the first Secret Wars, which took place in 1984 and 1985, was a 12-issue crossover limited series in which the cosmic entity known as the Beyonder teleports heroes and villains from the Marvel Universe to a place he created called Battleworld, where they're meant to duke it out in a contest that became a beloved story arc ever since, and was also a brilliant way to sell a bunch of toys, if we're being honest. Now, during all of this, Dr. Doom managed to harness the power cosmic, gaining godlike power in an attempt to defeat the Beyonder. The sequel, which occurred almost a year after the original, would explain how Doom was alive in the current timeline. Then, let's flash forward to 2015, another Secret Wars was created, which positioned Doom as a survivor of a cataclysmic event in the multiverse, and he became God Emperor Doom, fully omnipotent. He had built his own battle world and used Molecule Man to empower himself. And last but not least, in at number 1, Thanos. Thanos didn't want to become a god for the sake of being a god. He wanted to become a god in order to prove himself worthy to his one true love, Lady Death, the entity and physical manifestation of death itself. After Thanos had successfully acquired all of the Infinity Gems and had placed them into the Gauntlet, the Mad Titan spent some of the very first panels of the Infinity Gauntlet comic story by literally creating a giant rock structure in space that spells out the word God in capital letters. Not even making this up. Meanwhile, Mephisto, who's like, yeah, I'm gonna side with him and not get dead and try to take advantage of his obvious insecurities, is tooting Thanos' horn by telling him he's in awe of being in Thanos' divine presence. And then, after building himself a very bougie base in space, Thanos commits the ultimate abuse of power. He snaps his fingers, wiping out half of all living beings in the entire universe, all to show Death just how much he loves her. Still, she rejects him, even after he manages to slaughter all of the remaining heroes and cosmic entities who join up with Adam Warlock to take him on. Ouch. In the end, it's his own self-doubt, insecurities, and his misjudgment of Nebula that bring his reign of terror to an end. And his goddom. Even though he's still pretty powerful.